The marriage officiant in Las Vegas called me Mrs. Castellano. I'd never been to Vegas. I'd never heard that name. And the woman he was describing, the one who'd stood at his little chapel altar in a white dress and signed a marriage certificate with my exact signature, in handwriting I'd never learned, was someone I wouldn't meet for another 7 years. But she had my face. My exact face. And by the time I finally stood across from her, she'd already used it to marry 3 different men, collect $2.3 million in divorce settlements, and file a life insurance policy listing me as dead. My name is Margot Chen Davies. I'm 29 years old. I'm an immigration attorney in Seattle. And 8 months ago, I walked into my twin sister's engagement party on Mercer Island, carrying a court summons for bigamy charges, and I watched her groom's jaw go slack when he looked at me, and then looked at her, and realized the woman in 3 different marriage certificates was standing in his foyer holding a manila envelope. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the part where I didn't know I had a sister at all. I grew up in Tacoma with my father, David Davies. My mother, he told me, died in childbirth. There was no grave to visit because she'd been cremated. There were no photos because my father said it hurt too much to keep them. And there was no family on her side because, according to my dad, the Chen family wanted nothing to do with a mixed-race baby who reminded them of a daughter they'd lost. I accepted all of this the way children accept weather. It was simply the shape of the world I'd been born into. But I always felt it. This incompleteness. Like I was a sentence missing its verb. Like I was standing in half a doorway. I carried an unexplained birthmark on my left shoulder blade, a crescent shape the color of milky coffee. And whenever I asked my father about it, he'd touch it with his thumb and say it was nothing. Just a birthmark. Nothing to worry about. I was 22 when the first crack appeared. I applied to renew my passport, routine paperwork for an immigration attorney, and the application came back denied. Records showed I was already married to a man named Vincent Castellano in Nevada, a state I had never visited in my life. I sat in my apartment in Capitol Hill staring at the rejection letter, and I remember the specific quality of the silence in that moment. The way the refrigerator hummed and the rain hit the window and my own breathing sounded like it belonged to someone else. I called the Nevada Vital Records office. They confirmed it. Marriage certificate, signed, filed, legal, my name, my social security number, my face in the photo. But the signature, when they faxed me a copy, it was my name in handwriting that curved where mine angles, that looped where mine prints. Someone had practiced being me but hadn't quite finished the homework. I hired a lawyer. We got it annulled. I thought it was identity theft, the kind you read about. Some stranger who'd stolen my information. I filed police reports. I froze my credit. I moved on. 2 years later, I was 24. And I received alimony court papers from a second husband. This one in Florida. A man named Gregory Whitfield demanding I appear for divorce proceedings. The evidence packet included photographs. My face. My exact face. The same mole beneath the left eye. The same jawline. But the body in the photos was different. Thinner through the hips. Slightly taller. Wearing clothes I would never choose, silk and gold and that particular shade of red that looks expensive and desperate at the same time. I stared at those photos for an hour. I held them up next to my bathroom mirror, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was looking at identity theft. I felt like I was looking at a ghost, or like I was the ghost. I called my father. I told him everything. The marriage in Nevada, the divorce papers from Florida, the photographs of a woman wearing my face. And my father, my quiet, steady, reliable father, went silent. I counted. 40 seconds. 40 seconds of nothing but his breathing on the other end of the line, slightly ragged, the way it gets when his blood pressure spikes. And then he said, very quietly. I thought they'd stopped. I thought it was over. I didn't know about the death certificate yet. That discovery would shatter everything I thought I understood about my own existence. But in that moment, sitting on the edge of my bed in Seattle with the phone pressed to my ear, I understood that my father had been keeping something from me my entire life, and that whatever it was large enough to swallow me. He didn't tell me that night. He said he needed time. He said it was complicated. He said the words, "I'm sorry, Margot," in a voice I'd never heard from him before. The voice of a man who'd been carrying something heavy for 29 years and just felt the handle crack. I gave him a week. Then I started digging on my own. I'm an immigration attorney. I untangle legal identities for a living. I trace documents across borders, verify authenticity, challenge forgeries, reconstruct paper trails that governments have tried to erase. And now I turned every skill I had inward, toward my own life. Within 2 weeks, I found the life insurance policy. It listed me as deceased. Margot Chen Davies, date of birth matching mine, cause of death listed as stillbirth complications. The beneficiary was a woman named Celeste Chen. Address in Phoenix, Arizona. I pulled up her social media, and there she was. My face. My exact face, down to the crescent birthmark on the left shoulder blade visible in a swimsuit photo from Scottsdale. The same birthmark my father always said was nothing. I want to pause here. I want to talk to you for a moment. Whoever you are, listening to this. Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's life? Maybe you were. Maybe someone was out there wearing your face and cashing checks you never wrote. Have you ever met someone and felt like you were looking in a mirror that lied? I spent 26 years believing I was a whole person with a simple, sad story, mother dead, father devoted, life moving forward. And in the space of 4 years, I discovered that my entire existence had been folded in half by someone who decided that one of us was real and one of us was disposable. I was the disposable one. And I didn't even know it until a marriage officiant in Vegas called me by a name I'd never heard. I flew to Phoenix. I found Celeste at a coffee shop on Camelback Road, the kind of place with oat milk and exposed brick and succulents on every table. I'd planned what I would say. I'd rehearsed it on the plane. But when I walked in and saw her sitting by the window, stirring an iced latte with a metal straw, and she looked up, and our eyes met, I forgot everything. My reflection in the coffee shop window suddenly had 2 faces. She was me. I was her. The same cheekbones, the same slight asymmetry in the brow line, the same hands wrapped around the same size cup. The only difference was her teeth, slightly whiter than mine, and the way she held herself. Looser, more expansive, like someone who'd never had to wonder if she deserved the space she occupied. She didn't look surprised to see me. She smiled, with my mouth. And she said, "You were supposed to stay dead, little sister. That was the whole point." That sentence, I need you to hear it the way I heard it. Not shouted, not dramatic. Said with the casual warmth of someone explaining a household rule to a guest. You were supposed to stay dead, like my non-existence was a lifestyle choice I'd rudely abandoned. Like the death certificate with my name on it was a social contract I'd broken by having the audacity to keep breathing. I sat down across from her. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady, because when you spend your career in immigration court arguing against deportation orders, you learn to separate your body's panic from your mouth's precision. She told me everything, or her version of everything. Our mother hadn't died in childbirth. Our mother had left, walked out when we were 11 months old, and our grandmother, our mother's mother, a woman named Liling Chen, had taken custody of Celeste while my father fought for me. But grandmother didn't want 2 granddaughters. 2 was complicated. 2 meant splitting resources, splitting attention, splitting the narrative she was building. So she altered my birth certificate, listed me as stillborn. Baby girl A, deceased. Baby girl B, Celeste, alive and sole heir to whatever version of the family grandmother was constructing. My father fought for years. He showed me the custody records later, a folder 3 inches thick he'd kept in a locked filing cabinet in his basement. Court filings, attorney letters, motions denied. He'd tried to get Celeste too, tried to keep us together. But grandmother had money and lawyers and a version of events that painted my father as unstable. He got me. He lost her. And he made a decision I still don't fully understand, but am learning to forgive. He decided never to tell me about Celeste. He didn't want me to know I was, his words, the twin nobody wanted to claim. Celeste, meanwhile, had discovered early that having an identical twin listed as dead was useful. At 19, she married Vincent Castellano using my identity because hers already had a juvenile record she wanted to keep separate from a marriage. When that marriage ended, she kept the name. Married Gregory Whitfield in Florida under her own name but used my social security number for the financial documents. Married a third man, Paul Maddox in Colorado, using a combination of both our identities so tangled that no single record search could unravel it cleanly. $2.3 million in divorce settlements across 3 marriages. And a life insurance policy on me, the dead twin, just in case the paperwork ever needed a body to point to. I sat in that Phoenix coffee shop, and I listened to my sister describe the systematic theft of my identity with the same tone someone uses to explain a successful business model. And the thing that kept echoing in my skull, the thing I couldn't shake for weeks afterward, was this. I spent my whole life feeling incomplete because someone literally stole the other half of my story and sold it 4 times to the highest bidder. That was the moment I stopped being a victim and became an architect. Not right there in the coffee shop. Not dramatically. It happened on the flight home. Somewhere over the desert between Phoenix and Seattle, staring out the window at nothing, I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter and harder. Precision. I was going to dismantle this. Every forged document, every stolen identity, every fraudulent marriage. I was going to take my existence back, and I was going to do it with the same methodical patience that I used to build asylum cases for my clients. The difference was that this time, the person I was fighting for was me. And then I discovered the 4th marriage. Celeste was engaged again, to a tech billionaire named Adrian Sato, based in Seattle, my city, and the wedding was in 3 weeks, at his estate on Mercer Island. And the identity Celeste was using for this marriage was mine. My clean legal identity, the one I'd spent years repairing after the Nevada annulment, the one attached to my law license and my credit history and my apartment lease. She was using it because her own identity was now so tangled in fraud that no background check could clear it. She needed to be me one more time, and she'd sent me flowers. A massive arrangement of white peonies delivered to my office with a card that said, "Let's finally be sisters. Call me." I stood in my office holding that card, the peonies heavy with scent, my paralegal asking if I was okay, and I felt the ground tilt. Because for one breath, one stupid human breath, I wanted it to be real. I wanted a sister. I wanted the card to mean what it said. I wanted the woman with my face to be someone I could sit across from at holidays, someone who'd known our mother, someone who could fill in the half of the story I'd been missing. The charm of it was exquisite. Let's finally be sisters. As if the past 7 years of fraud and identity theft and a forged death certificate were just a misunderstanding between siblings. I put the card down. I picked up my phone. And I called the one person I trusted completely. Her name is Diane Okafor. She's a family law attorney I'd worked with on cross-border custody cases. I told her everything Every document, every marriage, every conversation. And Diane, who has the emotional range of a filing cabinet and the strategic mind of a chess grandmaster, said exactly 3 words. We build this. Over the next 19 days, I lived 2 lives. In the visible one, I went to work. I met with clients. I ate lunch at the same place I always ate lunch. I answered Celeste's texts with carefully calibrated warmth. Not too eager, not too cold. The tone of a sister cautiously opening a door. I even told her I'd consider coming to the wedding. In the invisible life, I was constructing a legal case that would detonate like a controlled demolition at the exact moment it would do the most structural damage. Diane and I worked in her office after hours. We pulled the marriage certificates from Nevada, Florida, and Colorado. We obtained the forged death certificate listing me as stillborn. We subpoenaed the life insurance policy. We documented the Social Security fraud, the identity theft, the pattern of marriages and settlements that constituted a criminal enterprise spanning 4 states. I filed a petition to restore my legal identity with evidence that it had been fraudulently used, and I obtained bigamy charges because Celeste was about to marry her 4th husband while legally still married to her 3rd. Paul Maddox in Colorado had never finalized the divorce. Day 9 was the first time I almost got caught. Celeste called me while I was at Diane's office reviewing the Nevada marriage file. I stepped into the hallway, my heart hammering against my sternum, and answered with what I hoped sounded like relaxed curiosity. She wanted to know if I'd gotten the flowers. She wanted to talk about dresses. She wanted to tell me she'd reserved a seat for me at the head table. And then, almost offhand, she asked if I'd talked to anyone about our conversation in Phoenix. Just checking, she said. Just making sure we're keeping things between us. Sister's business. My mouth was dry. The file I'd been reading was visible through the glass door behind me. I told her I hadn't told anyone. I said I was still processing. I asked her what color she wanted me to wear. And when I hung up, I sat on the hallway floor with my back against the wall and pressed my palms against my eyes until the shaking stopped. Day 14. My grandmother called. Liling Chen. A woman I had never spoken to in my life, calling from a number I didn't recognize. Her voice was precise and cold, accented English, immaculate grammar. She called me a complication. She offered me $50,000 to disappear, to leave Seattle, to stop responding to Celeste's messages, to go back to being the dead twin. She said it without malice, the way you'd offer to pay a contractor to redo a job they'd botched. I was a problem to be solved, a line item in a budget. I recorded the call. Diane had told me to record everything, and when my grandmother said the word complication, I added it to the evidence file with a note. Recorded statement from Liling Chen offering payment to suppress identity restoration. Day 16 was the worst. I was at the storage unit I'd rented to keep the evidence files, copies separate from Diane's originals, because an immigration attorney knows you never keep documents in only one location. I was locking up when I saw a car I recognized. Celeste's rental. A white Audi parked 3 spaces away. My pulse spiked so hard my vision tunneled. I walked to my car without changing pace, without looking at the Audi, without doing anything that could be interpreted as noticing it. I drove to a grocery store, parked, waited 20 minutes, drove home. Later, I checked the storage facility's security footage through my rental app. The Audi had been there for a delivery to a different unit. It wasn't her. But that night, I lay in bed and felt the cost of the double life in every muscle, the constant vigilance, the parsing of every coincidence for threat, the exhaustion of performing normalcy while building a bomb. 3 days before the wedding, I pulled my father's old hospital bracelet from the box he'd given me when I moved to Seattle. Baby Girl A, faded ink on plastic, cracked and yellowed. I held it in my palm and felt its weight, which was almost nothing and simultaneously everything. Then I drove to Diane's office and we finalized the sequence. The night before, I laid out my clothes. Black dress. Understated. Professional. The kind of thing you'd wear to a formal event or to deliver someone's legal destruction. I put the manila envelope on my kitchen counter. The bigamy summons, the 3 marriage certificates, the forged death certificate, the identity theft documentation. I set my alarm for 5 a.m., and I lay in bed in my apartment in Capitol Hill, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain, and I understood that tomorrow I was going to walk into a room full of strangers and claim my own existence out loud for the first time in my life. I did not sleep, but I rested. There's a difference. I arrived at the Mercer Island estate at 6:30 in the evening. The engagement party was in full swing. Catering staff with trays of champagne, a string quartet on the terrace. The tech billionaire's home was glass and cedar, the kind of Pacific Northwest architecture that costs 8 figures and looks like it grew out of the hillside. I gave my name at the gate. Celeste had put me on the list. Her identical twin sister, coming to celebrate. I walked through the front door and the groom saw me first. Adrian Sato. He smiled, started to say something, then stopped. Because he was looking at me, and then looking across the room at Celeste, and the calculation was happening behind his eyes in real time. I walked past him. I walked through the living room where 60 guests held champagne flutes and made small talk about things that wouldn't matter in 4 minutes. I walked to where Celeste stood by the fireplace in a cream silk dress, her hand on Adrian's mother's arm, laughing with my laugh. She saw me, and for the first time, I saw fear on my own face. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. I opened the manila envelope. I read, clearly and calmly, the names of 3 living husbands: Vincent Castellano, Gregory Whitfield, Paul Maddox. I stated that the woman standing before them was not Margot Chen Davies, but Celeste Chen, currently married to Paul Maddox of Colorado, making her upcoming marriage to Adrian Sato bigamous and void. I presented the summons. The groom's mother covered her mouth with both hands. My grandmother, sitting in a chair near the window, went very still and then seemed to fold inward, like a building whose foundation has been pulled out. Celeste tried to laugh. She tried the smile that had worked on 4 men and a family court. But the room was already shifting. Adrian's security team was already moving, and Celeste was being escorted out of her own engagement party while 60 guests stood frozen with champagne going flat in crystal glasses. I watched her leave. She looked back at me once, and in her eyes I saw something I recognized. Not anger. Recognition. She knew I'd done exactly what she would have done. She just never believed I had it in me. I didn't press criminal charges. I didn't need to. I filed to restore my legal identity, and the dominoes fell on their own. Adrian Sato's legal team sued Celeste for fraud and recovered $800,000 in engagement gifts. The 3 ex-husbands, alerted by the legal filings, initiated simultaneous actions to recover fraudulent settlements. My grandmother's carefully constructed family reputation, the version where she was a respectable matriarch with 1 successful granddaughter, imploded when the Seattle Times ran the story, and Celeste, who had built a life on the premise that I didn't exist, discovered what it felt like when the person you erased writes themselves back into the record. The messages came for weeks. Celeste is first, casual, almost amused. "That was dramatic, little sister." Then less amused. "We should talk. Call me." Then demanding, "You're going to regret this." Then silence for 3 days. Then bargaining. "I can explain everything. Give me a chance." Then my grandmother. "You've destroyed this family." Then Celeste again, late at night, a voicemail I still have. "I'm your sister. I'm your only sister. You can't just erase me." I listened to that one twice. The irony was so precise it felt mathematical. I didn't respond to any of them. Not one. The woman who'd spent 29 years as a forged death certificate had nothing to say to the people who'd forged it. 8 months later, I sat across from my father at a diner on 6th Avenue in Tacoma. Rain on the windows, the smell of coffee and bacon grease. I slid my new passport across the table. My real name, my real birth date, my real photograph. He picked it up and held it with both hands, the way he'd once held a hospital bracelet labeled Baby Girl A. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. I ordered pancakes for two, not because I was expecting anyone, because I was no longer half a person ordering half a meal. I was whole. The crescent birthmark on my shoulder, the one my father always said was nothing, turned out to be something. It was the mark that proved I was real, that I'd been born, that I'd survived, that I was here. And if you're listening to this and thinking about identity theft, let me give you two numbers that matter. The Federal Trade Commission reported that identity theft affected over 1 million Americans last year, and in cases involving family members, only 15% are ever reported because the victim knows the perpetrator. Disentangling your identity from someone who shares your DNA, your face, your documents, is not a matter of making a phone call. It requires legal strategy, documentation, patience, and the willingness to treat your own freedom as a case worth building. If you've ever felt like you were living someone else's life, listen to me. The exit from that feeling is not dramatic. It's logistical. It's one document at a time, one filing at a time, one morning at a time where you wake up and the name on your passport is yours, and the face in the mirror belongs to only you. It is quiet work, and it is the most important case you will ever build. 2 months later, I understood why grandmother never sent birthday cards. You don't send birthday cards to someone you've declared dead. I keep both hospital bracelets now, Baby Girl A and Baby Girl B. I found Baby Girl B in my grandmother's jewelry box during the legal proceedings, tucked behind a jade pendant like an afterthought. I keep them side by side in a glass frame on my desk. Not as a memorial, as evidence that there were always two of us, that one of us was stolen and one was erased, and that the erased one came back and wrote herself into the record in ink that doesn't wash out. So here's what I want to know. Where are you listening from right now? What city? What room? What hour of the night? And if you were me, standing in that foyer on Mercer Island with the envelope in your hands and your own face staring back at you from across the room, what would you have done? Would you have read the names? Would you have walked away? Would you have tried to be sisters first? If you follow this channel, you know I tell stories about people who refuse to stay erased. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done with 3 marriage certificates and a forged death certificate and a twin sister who smiled at you with your own mouth and said you were supposed to stay dead. I'll be reading every single one, because the thing about coming back from the dead is you pay attention to every voice that says they see you, every single one.